Welcome to the LDHR Podcast, where ministry leaders grow together. Over the next few months, we will be releasing episodes intermittently alongside our other series to talk about growing on purpose, highlighting the people and pathways for growing where you are and with what you've been entrusted. Through these episodes, you'll hear from people with insights and practical steps that you can apply right away. You'll also have the opportunity to find out more about the resources that are available to you and how you can intentionally grow on purpose wherever God has you. Come on in and listen. We're so glad you're here. Hi, Karen. Welcome back to the LDHR Podcast. I'm really happy that you're able to join me again. This time, we're here to talk about a topic that's near and dear to both of our hearts, and that is coaching. We really want to highlight some of the tools that are available to our staff and also provide practical applications and tips people can use right away in their work and personal lives. I thought it might be helpful for us to maybe kind of define some of our terms as we begin. So, how do you define and maybe what are the differences between coaching and using coaching skills?
Oh, Beth, that's a great question. And by the way, thanks for having me. It's always fun to be with you. When I think of coaching, I think of an intentional conversation with the goal of helping a person get from where they are to where they need or want to be. So it's a conversation with a specific purpose to help that person move forward. Coaching skills are what we use in the conversation to help make that happen.
Yeah, that's a really helpful distinction between the two. The actual coaching event is, I like how you define that, from moving from where they are to where they want to be. And then the skills are how we get about doing that. So if people haven't gone through coach training to become certified coaches, what coaching skills can they still use in any conversation or relationship?
Well, in actuality, they can use any and all the coaching skills because they interpersonal skills that are used in a lot of venues. I would say what I believe to be the two top ones are listening and asking powerful questions. And those two play off of each other. As we listen well, we naturally can figure out what might be a good question to ask. And then as we ask that question, we stop and we listen again. So they go hand in hand. And, there are other skills in coaching, but I would say those are the two that probably help anyone in any type of conversation they're in.
So what are some of the benefits? You said it'll help anyone in any conversation, but what are some of those benefits of using listening skills in our conversations?
I've heard it said, and I truly believe that when we listen to someone, we're giving them a very powerful gift. A lot of times when we're chatting with someone, we're not always sure they're listening to us. In a workshop that I lead, I'll ask people, how do you feel when you're talking to someone and you could tell they're really not listening to you? And I get all these answers: discouraged, alone, frustrated. And then I say, okay, so tell me how you feel when you know somebody's listening to you. And they come back with valued, empowered, and just listening to the difference of the emotions that people feel when someone is truly listened to. It's a gift. People walk away feeling valued, respected, cared for, that they've gotten something out of the conversation. I'm a real proponent of listening and listening well.
That makes sense. So what are some of those listening skills that people can use in the relationship? How do you develop that? How do you
Mm,
develop a skill to listen well?
sure. Well, like anything, you develop it by practice. But one thing I like to tell people is using the acrostic WAIT, WAIT in English, and it stands for why am I talking? Often talking and filling space instead of listening. And in doing so, I may be thinking about what I want to say next. instead of thinking, to wait before I speak and fully listen to the person. I'm guilty of this and I've learned and I continue to grow, but somebody will share something and I want to jump in and goes, "Oh yeah, that happened to," and I want to share my story instead of listening to them. Or it may be I all of a sudden I have a solution that I think they should hear instead of listening more to them. So I need to really learn to wait and truly listen to someone, to ask good questions, allow that person to continue talking and processing as we speak. And someone said, "Well, how do you do that? What are some ways to listen?" And I'll give you a couple. We can listen with our mind. In other words, we are focused on that person with our mind. We can listen with our bodies. In other words, we're making eye contact with them. Maybe we're leaning slightly forward. We're engaging with them in that way. We're not sitting with our arms crossed, which typically makes people feel like we're not interested. We have more of an open posture.
Yeah.
We listen with our words. And you're like, listen with your words? What does that mean? Well, we ask clarifying questions. I was speaking to someone this morning and I said, "Hey, you said that like 3 times today. What actually do you mean by that?" And their response is, "That's a great question." It was a simple question, just helping to clarify, really not for me, but for them. They were using a phrase and hadn't really thought about what it meant to them. And so as I listen, I help them clarify. We can listen with our intuition. In other words, what's the meaning behind the words? We can listen by listening to what they're not saying, as well as what they are saying. And then lastly, as a believer in Christ, we listen with the Holy Spirit. In other words, we use spiritual discernment as we listen. And, we ask the Spirit to speak to us so that we have wisdom to know how to continue in the conversation that might be helpful to them.
Thank you. Those are some really practical tips that we can use in
Mhm.
how we listen well. I know people are just listening to the audio, but we can see each other actually as we're talking. And so a lot of those really resonated with me of how we listen with our mind, with our
Mm.
bodies, with our words. Those really resonated. Thank you for sharing that, Karen. So, how can implementing listening skills maybe improve our relationships, both inside work and outside work? We're recording this,
Mhm.
Valentine's Day is coming up.
Sure.
How can we use them to help improve our relationships?
Well, I think it's important to realize when we're in a conversation, what's the purpose of the conversation? Is it a friendship? Is it a work relationship, a director, a directee? Is it a planning time with the team? Is it mentoring? Because we will use different skills in different ways in those different conversations. I think that when we use our listening skills, though, and we do it well, people feel valued, they feel trusted. We can go to a deeper level in a relationship as people begin to open up more because they feel cared for as they're being listened to. I think it's important that we become aware, but then the person being listened to gains awareness, even with themselves as they're speaking. And so I think that improves relationships. We just get to know people at a different level and we learn from it. We make adjustments as we move forward.
Thank you. What do you think, on the flip side, then prevents us from listening well?
Well, I have been a professional at that throughout the years, and I have learned and continue to learn not to let things get in the way. One of them is distractions. We are so easily distracted. I say, I am so easily distracted. I may have my phone in my hand, or I haven't turned off the ringer, and I may be looking at a text message that came in or checking social media. I'm just distracted. I may be distracted by somebody that walks by. And instead of focusing on the person, I'm looking over there, waving to them, just not good things to do if the person is really going to feel listened to. The other thing is if I'm jumping in too quickly with my own thoughts, my own opinions, my own solutions, In a coaching appointment, you really don't do that at all or very, very seldom. But of course, in a friendship, sometimes they want those things from us. They want to know our opinion. They want to know, what would you do? However, if I jump in too quickly, I don't give them the opportunity to maybe figure it out for themselves. Because when they have that opportunity, they're empowered because it becomes their own solution and not something that, oh, well, Karen told me to do this. And so I don't want to prevent myself from listening well by listening to the own words in my own mind. Yeah, I need to calm my mind down, really focus on the person and not be distracted again by all those solutions and opinions that I might have.
I get that. And I don't think you're the only one who is easily distracted. I know I am as well. And many of our listeners probably are too. I am curious, what do you think? I think as a culture, we are easily distracted.
Mhm.
So, what do you think that reflects about our heart posture to those relationships that we are so easily distracted and that keeps us
Mm.
from listening well?
Well, in some ways, I think we've gotten caught up in it because that is the culture, because everything has become very fast. The instant this, instant that. You can go online and get information in a second. I know I'll be talking to someone and something will be said, they'll be like, "Ooh," and they'll start looking online for a solution or an answer, and the conversation stops. So I think our culture is distracted. We have lost the art of slowing down and of truly focusing on the other person. A lot of conversations, I've been in rooms when I've worked with athletes where they're all texting, only to find out they're texting each other and they're sitting in the same room.
Oh,
And so there's no real conversation going on. So I think in a lot of ways, we continue to lose the art of good conversation as a result of our culture.
that makes a lot of sense. So, again, coming back to we probably won't develop these skills overnight, but they will take some
No,
practice.
it
But
does. It's intentionality.
right. But it also sounds like it's worthwhile how it can benefit our relationships. For me, when I am in a conversation, often I want to express empathy and curiosity in my conversations with others, but I don't always want to come across as agreeing or disagreeing.
Mhm,
What skills do you think I can use to kind of hold that tension of engaging in a conversation, but not always sounding like I'm agreeing or disagreeing?
mhm. I do think it's good to express empathy and curiosity with people, to listen well. I don't believe that necessarily means we agree with people. I had someone share with me something that was, extremely hard for them, and I didn't agree with their take on it, but I didn't go to correction. I went to, "Wow, sounds like that was really hard for you," and just let them talk about it. So I acknowledged and I showed empathy, but I didn't judge it. I didn't try to correct it. The conversation we were in, that wasn't my place to do that. Now, if we were a really good friend and I really thought this would be helpful to them, I might say, "Hey, can I give you a little feedback on what I'm noticing?" And I'd be very tentative about my feedback and like, "Could it be? I wonder if," and then I would just say it in a few words and let it go and let them, go with it. I wouldn't try to convince them. So I think depending on the nature of the conversation, we may need to make those observations, but we always need to be tentative. And yet I think we show love to people as we're empathetic, as we're curious about their lives and about whatever the situation talking in. So I don't think it's an either or. I think it's the way we do it.
I appreciate the way you broke that down. And I think one thing that stood out to me was you offered a question even to them to say, "Can I give you a little feedback?" Which I think maybe creates that buy in for them that we don't have to make a judgment. But if it is someone that we care about and we see something, we're actually using some of those coaching skills of asking good questions.
Sure.
And I think that really stood out to me.
Mm.
Instead of just telling or saying my advice, but creating a space where they could say yes or no. So, what's one thing our listeners can put into practice today as they're listening to this to work on becoming better listeners?
Well, if I can, I'll give you two.
I would love it.
One is to recognize what often distracts you and work at setting that stuff aside. So making sure your phone is off if you're in a meeting or in a conversation, making sure the TV's off. If you're having a conversation with someone, Valentine's Day's coming up. You may want to turn off the TV if you're with your significant other and actually have a conversation where you're not distracted by what's going on the television. The other thing is to learn to wait. Ask yourself, why am I talking? And to slow down and just to listen, to choose to listen, to focus on them and make it a choice to intentionally listen to them.
Great. Those are two really great ideas. Thank you. So if others want to learn more about how to sharpen their coaching skills more than just listening skills, can you tell us a little bit about what you've got going on and how others can be involved?
Sure. So I lead a number of coaching workshops that go 1, 2, or 3 days with some smaller skill training aside from that. And, that's one thing people can sign up for, get involved in, they could sponsor. And I would say if there's anyone listening who's not with our organization, they can still perhaps contact me. I certainly can suggest to them where they can get that outside of our organizational training. The other thing is we have a monthly webinar called Sharpening Your Coaching Skills. And we meet once a month. And each month I take a different skill and we dive into it and we also practice it. So there's an opportunity to go into a breakout room and to have some time to practice that skill before you leave the webinar. So those are two things that we have going on. And I think, Beth, you have an email address people can inquire at.
Right. If people want to hear more or get in contact with Karen, they can always email the Llama. That's LLAMA at crew.org, CRU.org. And we can put you in touch with Karen to find out how you can be involved in maybe that webinar or find out some other coaching opportunities and trainings.
Thanks, Beth.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Karen, for your time today. And
of course.
We hope to have you back again.
Yes, it's always my pleasure and it's great seeing you.
Thank you so much for joining us today as we heard from Karen about practical ways we can practice listening in our relationships, both personally and professionally. As you try out noticing what distracts you in a conversation, or you practice wait, why am I talking? Write a note in the comments to share what you learned and experienced. If you'd like more information about coaching or to contact Karen, email us at llama@crew.org. That's LLAMA@CRU.org. See you next time.